But the notion that they can't innovate, what gives the lie to that, as if you talk to American businesses who operate in China or European businesses who operate in China, what they'll tell you is that we first came here for the market, and now we come here to be close to the innovation. That we cannot basically be in touch with the cutting edge of our field, particularly in autos, unless you're here. The sound, Ezra, you know how you buy cars now every 2 years and they always say, it's got Dolby, surround, yada, yada. I have never in my life heard sound like this in a moving vehicle. It is just so far ahead of anything, I've seen here.
大家好，今天要和大家分享纽约时报专栏作家托马斯对弗里德曼的访谈精选。弗里德曼常年往返中美，数十年持续观察两国经贸与产业发展，多次实地走访中国新能源、智能制造等前沿产业，亲眼见证国内完整工业生态的发展全貌。在这次对话里，他直接点破如今华盛顿两党高度统一的强硬对华共识存在巨大盲区，抛开政客固有偏见，客观拆解中美在电动车、电池、人工智能领域的真实竞争格局。他没有非黑即白的站队，而是立足全球视角，剖析单边关税、全面脱钩带来的双向损耗，也点明21世纪气候 AI 全球动荡三大难题，唯有中美合作才有解决出路。接下来我们一起听听他的完整论述。
I wrote then that it was like America and China were two elephants looking at each other through a straw. Having just been there 2 weeks ago, I would say now they're like two elephants looking at each other through a needle. And the backstory to this is not all an American failure at all. It has to do with also what happened in China, beginning with the rise of President Xi Jinping between 2012, 2013, and then making himself, in effect, president for life. China went in reverse. It made a U-turn. The China that we thought was, more or less 2 steps forward, 1 step back, but on a trajectory for more openness at home and more integration with the world, that really stopped under Xi Jinping. And it was combined with a program Xi launched, which was to basically make sure that China dominated all the 21st century industries, from aerospace to new materials to autonomous vehicles to robots. And that changed the whole chemistry in the U.S.-China relationship. But central to that, Ezra, was that the ballast in this relationship was always the American business community. So they were the ones who, for many years, beginning in the late 70s, were making money in China. And even whenever the relationship got rocky, and even when we perceived China was not living up to trade obligations under WTO, American business would basically lobby and say, look, be cool. It's okay. We're still making money here. And what happened, this combination basically of Xi taking a U-turn, fewer and fewer American businesses feeling they were getting the benefits out of China that they wanted and were having to transfer too much technology, and then China rising on its own with its own technological homegrown tech prowess. Those 3 things really kind of blew up the relationship.
You mention it in terms of the reduction in these cross-border exchanges, technology exchanges, student exchanges. The other side of that story I have heard from Americans, from business leaders, from other people in power, was the growing belief, recognition that China had been conducting a massive level of industrial and even educational and political espionage against America. And some of the fears about Chinese students studying here, about hiring Chinese workers here, was a feeling that at a high level, though not predictable to any individual person, a lot of this was leading to spying, was leading to the theft of technological secrets. And connected to that, a belief that was what was behind China's rise. that China wasn't just rising, that what they were doing was stealing from us and building on top of that. You have this quote from Senator Josh Hawley, a Republican influential in foreign affairs, that China can't really innovate. They can just steal from us. So I'm curious how you think that played into it.
Yeah, I can't speak to the espionage. I just don't know. And you get in these kind of Washington conversations with officials where it goes like, if only you knew what I knew, you would be more worried. And my reaction to that is, I wish I knew what you knew, because it would put everything more in perspective. But I also, part of my reaction to that too, Ezra, is that I hope we're doing the same to them. I hope we're spying and conducting whatever we need to do for our national security purposes. But the notion that they can't innovate, what gives the lie to that, Ezra, is if you talk to American businesses who operate in China, or European businesses who operate in China, what they'll tell you is that we first came here for the market, and now we come here to be close to the innovation. That we cannot basically be in touch with the cutting edge of our field, particularly in autos, unless you're here. So China realized it could not compete with combustion vehicles with America. And so it took the decision to leapfrog them right to EVs and ultimately autonomous driving cars. It did so by basically having its smartphone companies become car companies. So when I came to China after COVID, I said, wow, when I was last here, Xiaomi was a phone company. I came back, they were a car company. When I was here last, Huawei was a phone company. I came back, they were a car company. And so basically they put their cell phones on wheels. And the reason this is important is that when you get into a Didi's their Uber, it is a seamless digital experience from the rest of your life. It syncs up with your cell phone. I rode in a Huawei car when I was just there, and I was riding with someone from Huawei. He took out his laptop, pulled down a screen that came out of the ceiling, and his laptop immediately synced with that screen, and he was working in the car. He says, what would you like to see? Do you want to see anything? I said, yeah. Get me Paul Simon's concert in London's Hyde Park. I'd like to watch that on the way to your campus. It was up in, I'd say, about 30 seconds. The sound, Ezra, you know how you buy cars now every 2 years and they always say, it's got Dolby, surround, yada, yada. I have never in my life heard sound like this in a moving vehicle. It is just so far ahead of anything, I've seen here. Volkswagen, for instance, I met with their China head when I was there. They've got a whole facility there. They call it, in China for China. That unless you're competing with the best, what my friend Jörg Wittke, the head of the European Union Chamber of Commerce, calls the China Fitness Club, unless you're in the gym with them, you're going to get run over.
So this conversation we're having emerges out of a conversation we had a little bit randomly on the phone. You had just come from China and I just come back from book tour. And we were talking about something else, but then I asked you how your China trip was. And what you said to me basically was, Ezra, you have no idea how screwed we are.
Yeah. Because what you see, Ezra, when you're there is the product of 30 years of being in the fitness gym. And it's a particularly Chinese fitness gym. And it kind of works like this. New industry comes along, let's call it solar panels. Every major city in China decides they need a solar panel factory. And the local government subsidizes it, maybe domestically born, maybe partnership with a foreign one, maybe a foreign one. And you end up in a very short period of time, I'm making the number up, but with 75 solar panel companies. They then compete like crazy against each other in the fitness gym, and 5 of them survive. Those 5 are so fit that they can then go global at a price and level of innovation that is very hard for a foreign competitor to deal with, which is why China today basically controls the global solar panel market. But what you also don't see is that process of winnowing down from 100 of those solar panel companies to 5 produced a massive explosion of supply chains domestically to feed that industry. Same thing went on with cars. The same thing goes on with robots. And so where you end up 5 years later is with interlocking set of supply chains that now, if you're a young Chinese and say, I've just got this idea. I want to produce a shirt that has a pink polka dot button that can sing the Chinese national anthem backward. Someone will have it for you tomorrow.
So the process you're describing here, the Chinese government identifies solar panels as an industry. They, using a variety of mechanisms, absolutely flood the country with subsidized financing to become a solar panel company. And you get very strange things here, like there was an example a couple of years back where one of the big real estate firms there that was in crisis tried to become an EV firm because then it could get a bunch of finance.
Yeah. Yep.
The Chinese government absorbs a huge amount of waste, failure, and graft. Solyndra times 1,000. Things we would never accept in this country.
Yes.
So a bunch of these firms just pocket money for nothing. A bunch of them fail. But in that, on the other side of that process of failure, waste, graft, you get these very, very potent national champions, they're called, that then the Chinese government puts a huge amount of resources behind. And I want to add one other thing because it speaks to some of the trade fights we're having. For China to have the money to do this, to not require more efficiency from their own companies and their own investments, part of the way they're doing it is keeping wages suppressed in their country.
Yes.
Part of the way they're doing it is exporting much more than they consume. Part of the way they're doing it is maintaining a kind of imbalanced economy, highly focused on production. But going back to this idea of the gym, the fitness, like we understand in America, right, capitalism, survival of the fittest, they don't demand that you're very fit at the beginning. They demand that you're fit at the end. We actually demand, with the exception of some VC investments that are fairly, usually fairly small scale, we demand that you're fit at the beginning.
It's a very good point, and I'll give you a perfect example of that. So there was Ford Motor today has built a battery factory in Marshall, Michigan, using the IRA money from the Biden administration. That factory makes batteries for EVs. The technology, though, comes from China. It's a company called CATL. That CATL technology was actually born in America in the Obama administration. People tried to scale it here then. They failed. The founders basically, it went into bankruptcy, and a Chinese entrepreneur bought it, took it back to China, scaled it there, and is now doing tech transfer to Ford, bringing it back here. It's a perfect example of what you're talking about, so the lack of patience. Let me back into your question, Ezra, by just giving you my worldview, so how I think of this whole China issue. I think that the net result of where we are as a world in terms of development right now, in call this the post-Cold War era, is humanity faces basically 3 existential questions. One is how we manage artificial general intelligence. And we are going to have to find a way to collaborate to make sure we get the best and cushion the worst out of what is going to be a new species. That's number one. Second, as a product of our development, we have unleashed a level of climate change that we have to collaborate in order to deal with. And thirdly, I believe the combination of all these stresses is going to blow up a lot of states, a lot of weak states. And you're going to have zones of disorder. You already see that in some parts of the world. My view is there are only 2 superpowers who can manage this, but only if they collaborate, the United States and China. They can learn that early, or they can learn that late. They can learn that painlessly or painfully. But my view is they're going to have to learn that. And so for me, liking China, not liking China, It's just not in my equation. That is the world I think we're going into. And therefore, to me, as an American, it's essential that we play in that ecosystem and that we be able to compete head-to-head with China in that ecosystem. So that's how I'm coming at this problem. I'm not even thinking about Taiwan. I'm not thinking about communism or capital. I mean, I quoted a Trump official a while back who said, China's goal in the world is to spread authoritarian Marxism. Oh my God. China's got a lot of goals in the world, Ezra, but one of them is not spreading authoritarian Marxism, okay? They're trying to spread Muskism, not Marxism. That's the game they're trying to beat us at. They're trying to beat us at our game, not Karl Marx's game. And we need to understand that and be serious about it.
看完托马斯·弗里德曼这段访谈，最让我感慨的并不是他夸赞中国电动车光伏产业有多领先，而是他戳破了当下美国政坛一个最荒诞的现实。如今华盛顿两党在对华议题上形成了铁板一块的固化共识，任何客观中立的声音都没有生存空间，不管是民主党还是共和党政客，只要说出一句客观评价中国的话，立刻会被扣上拥抱熊猫。软弱妥协的帽子，大家比拼谁对华态度更强硬，却几乎没人愿意真正走进中国，亲眼看看这片土地真实的产业与社会。长久以来，美国政界流传着一种根深蒂固的偏见，认定中国没有自主创新能力，所有产业突破全靠窃取欧美技术，参议员霍利的观点就是典型代表。但弗里德曼亲身走访小米、华为、大众中国研发中心，亲自乘坐华为智能汽车，直观感受到国内数字化生态。整车智能互联体验远远领先海外同类产品。他举的例子特别有说服力，从前小米、华为只是手机厂商，短短几年直接转型造车。依托本土完整电子、软件上下游供应链快速落地产品，设计师依靠本土 AI 设计工具，原本3个月的建模工作，如今3小时就能完成。这种高效创新土壤完全不是单纯抄袭能够解释的。弗里德曼提出的中国健身俱乐部产业模式是整段访谈最核心、最值得我们细细拆解的内容。每当出现光伏、新能源车、机器人这类全新战略性赛道，国内各个城市都会配套扶持政策，批量培育相关企业，大量企业同台充分竞争，行业前期会出现大量亏损企业，资源阶段性消耗，放在美国市场体系中根本无法被容忍，会迅速被资本抛弃。但经过残酷市场筛选存活下来的头部企业，不仅拥有极致成本与创新优势，还顺带催生了环环相扣、完整本土化配套产业链。全球光伏产业牢牢掌握在中国手中，就是这套模式最直观的成果。宁德时代的故事更是绝佳对照。电池技术最早诞生于美国本土企业，美国缺乏长期产业耐心，项目破产。中国企业接手持续投入规模化研发，如今反向向福特输出电池技术，完美凸显两国产业培育思维的巨大差距。除产业对比之外，弗里德曼点出的中美交流萎缩问题同样值得所有人重视。疫情叠加脱钩思潮，6年时间里几乎没有美国商界高管、议员来华实地考察，赴美中国留学生常年维持20多万的规模，而来华美国学生仅有寥寥数千人。双方像两头隔着针眼对视的大象，互相观察的窗口被无限收窄，信息壁垒越来越厚。很多美国人忌惮华人学者、留学生存在情报间谍行为，弗里德曼对此看得十分通透。情报博弈是全球各国维护国家安全的常规操作，美国自身同样会开展相关工作。不能采用双重标准单独指责中国，更不能仅凭模糊的恐慌切断所有正常学术商业交流。同时，他犀利批判了当下特朗普政府激进关税政策的致命缺陷。特朗普团队认为高额关税就能把制造业全部迁回美国本土，重新掌握产业主动权，但整套策略只有筑墙的手段，完全没有配套长期产业扶持方案。一边对华商品加征超高关税，试图阻击中国新能源产品，另一边却贬低电动汽车，扶持传统煤炭石油产业，削减高校科研经费，打压本国新能源车企， 前后政策自相矛盾，强行和全球所有贸易伙伴对立，放弃盟友统一战线。看似短期能施压，长期会推动各国逐步脱离美元主导的金融体系，慢慢瓦解美国维持多年全球经济霸权，最终得不偿失。在弗里德曼的全球宏观视角里，当下人类面临三大无法独善其身的生存难题：通用人工智能的风险管控，全球气候变暖治理，大量弱势国家动荡失序。放眼全球，只有中美两个超级大国拥有足够体量与资源牵头应对这些挑战，二者深度相互依存，不是可选择的道路，而是客观现实。如果持续割裂两套产业链、两套互联网、两套 AI 体系，陷入无休止零和博弈，只会双方同步内耗，最后没有赢家。他并不认同一山不容二虎的修昔底德陷阱思维，不认为中美只能分出唯一赢家，共存共赢才是长远出路。当然，弗里德曼并非一味吹捧中国，他的观点足够客观中立，没有片面美化。他也直言国内经济存在短板，内需占比偏低，经济高度侧重生产制造，养老金等民生保障仍有完善空间，经济结构失衡是长期需要调整的课题。他清晰看到双方各有长短，既不无视中国产业崛起的硬实力，也不回避我们现存的问题，区别于美国政坛非黑即白的极端论调。最可惜的是，这种理性观点在美国当下舆论环境里几乎没有市场。无论是民主党还是共和党从政者，都倾向做轻量化特朗普，只会跟风强硬，没人愿意认真探讨缓和双边关系、良性竞争的可行路径。所有人都在为冲突做准备，却没人思考如何搭建降温沟通的出口。这种自我强化的对立叙事只会不断预言自我实现，让两国滑向更危险的局面。弗里德曼也提到一个令人担忧的细节，不少对华友好美国学者入境时被美方扣留检查电子设备，民间信任持续崩塌，长此以往，两国之间理解的桥梁会彻底断裂。他最后提出的解决方案其实非常务实，不否认合理竞争，但要设立良性竞争规则，联合盟友循序渐进调整全球贸易失衡，同时开放双向合资通道，允许中国企业赴美建厂，强制配套本土供应链建设。美国在合作中学习先进制造经验，而非单纯一刀切隔绝。这套思路兼顾竞争与沟通，远比单纯筑墙封锁更具备长远可行性。弗里德曼整篇论述抛开意识形态对抗，没有纠结资本主义、共产主义的对立标签，直白点明中美真正的竞争赛场是机器人、电池、新能源车。人工智能这类21世纪核心产业比拼的是工业生态与创新效率，不是意识形态输出。那些宣称中国意在对外输出威权体制的政客，完全看错了竞争核心，两国争夺的是未来科技产业的赛道，不是思想传播。看完这段访谈，相信大家会有不同的思考角度。有人认同弗里德曼的产业分析，也会有人觉得他部分观点仍带有西方视角的局限，这些都很正常。欢迎大家在评论区理性交流，补充不同看法，整理这期访谈素材，梳理完整观点，花费了不少时间。如果本期内容对你有启发，麻烦一键3连支持一下。后续我会持续分享海外资深学者、记者的深度中立访谈，我们下期再见。